Chapter 3 Beyond the Veil. I have lived a life dipped in death for as long as I can remember. It is important that you understand this to fully grasp the depth of my story. Unlike the infamous tale of M. Night Shyamalan, I'm not about to confess to seeing those who have already passed on. No, that is not my story. My story is a little more devastating. It started when I was 13. My friend David and I were playing video games. He was better at playing Call of Duty than I was, but I enjoyed the company and the banter. We took a break to use the bathroom and grab a Coke. I returned from the kitchen, and he was back at the game without me. I was annoyed and told him he should have waited for me. David laughed, saying, "You snooze, you lose, crybaby." He turned to look at me, and I dropped my can of Coke and backed away. I felt sweat dripping from my brow, and I started shaking all over. David's face was crushed. His right eye popped out of its socket. His nose was shattered, and his jaw was hanging off his face. His whole body was shriveled, bloody, and grotesque. It was like he had been smashed to death with a sledgehammer. I screamed, pointed, and ran away. David didn't know what happened to me. He reached out to me several times over the next few days, but I refused to see him or talk to him. I couldn't bear to see that face again. 5 days later, my mother got the call. David and his father were heading home late one night after a movie. They were sitting at a red light when a drunk driver slammed into David's side of the car. He died instantly, his small body compressed by the impact. I couldn't believe my friend was gone. I never got the chance to tell him goodbye. I never got the chance to tell him what I saw. I told my mom, but she thought I had dreamed it. She didn't believe me when I told her that I had seen David's gory demise. At least, she didn't believe me until it happened again. About a month later, I was having dinner alone with my dad. Mom was working a 12-hour shift, as nurses are wont to do. She was still a couple hours from coming home. Dad and I loved to watch movies. Horror was our favorite. However, since David's death, I couldn't watch them without a sense of dread. Tonight, we compromised on an action flick. We were having such a great time that it almost made me forget the horrific sight that I had seen only 3 months before. My dad asked me to grab him a beer from the refrigerator. Obediently, I ran to the kitchen, not wanting to miss the movie. I came back and handed Dad the beer and sat down. He leaned over me to grab the remote to adjust the volume, and I felt water splash all over my face. Only, it wasn't water. It was blood. I wiped furiously and looked at my crimson fingers. I couldn't believe it. What the hell is happening? At first, I thought Dad had cut himself. I was totally confused and incoherently scared. "Dad?" I called out, uncertain if I wanted to know what was about to happen, and he looked at me, concern written in his raised brow. "What is it, champ?" Dad asked. "What's wrong?" I looked at my dad and saw a gaping hole in his chest. It looked like his heart was missing. His eyes rolled back into his head, and his mouth gaped open in a silent scream. He looked like something out of a zombie film. "Dad?" I screamed and reached a shaky hand out to him. He grabbed my hand, startled by my outburst, and shook me. I was so scared I bolted from the room. When my mother came home, she tried to comfort me. I told her what I saw. She looked at me like I was crazy. Understandable. But I saw what I saw. I couldn't be around my dad again, as I was too scared that I would see that face. A few days later, I found myself sitting in front of a therapist, trying to explain my visions. I didn't know what else to call them. After what happened to David, I didn't really know what else they could be. The therapist stated that while it was eerily coincidental, what happened with David was just a fluke. She suggested the trauma I was experiencing over David had started to affect my daily life, so she prescribed an antidepressant. My mother didn't know what to make of me, and I didn't know how to help her. Then, 2 days later, 5 full days after I saw the blood and his zombie expression, Dad died. He had a heart attack. More specifically, his heart literally exploded inside his chest. My mother's grief was inconsolable, But more than that, she was absolutely terrified. Of me. Months went by, and the visions persisted. I saw terrible things. Faces twisted in anguish, flesh that rotted and scabbed due to fire, bodies bloated and shriveled from drowning. I saw so much blood. I could have my own Red Cross. The months turned into years. I spent some of those inside mental institutions. I couldn't handle the visions. Every time it happened, the absolute panic, the overwhelming fear, the desire to end it all overcame me. My mother was all too happy to see me hospitalized. It kept her from having to handle me. Mother moved on in her life. She was able to remarry a nice accountant some 5 years after Dad died. They had a son, Zane. I was able to attend school while in the hospital, so I managed to get my GED. It was a nice distraction from seeing the imminent death masks of some of my neighbors. Mental institutions surprisingly breed death. I watched many of my fellow tormented patients die, sometimes due to some horrific accidents, but mostly by their own hands. I saw bloody arms, wrists, and legs. I saw bulging eyes and swollen tongues, and I saw tears of blood as their entrails lay out in front of them. I saw terrible things. And because of this, I adopted a manner of solitude. I cherished being alone. When I turned 21, I was released back to my mother. After returning home, I had my own room, and that was where I stayed. I ate, slept, showered, and worked in that room. I would have been happy to stay there alone, forever. But Zane wouldn't hear of it. A precocious 3-year-old. He was always knocking on my door or following me back to my room when I snuck out for food. Despite my desire for solitude, I found myself warming to the little brat. He really was a cute kid. He had dark curly hair, big blue eyes, a little button nose, and a soft smile. He was only 3, but he already had quite the personality. I had been living at home for about a year when I heard a knock on my bedroom door. The knock was soft enough for me to know it was Zane. He came in without asking as soon as the door opened and plopped onto my bed. I laughed softly and closed the door. When I turned around, I screamed. Zane was looking at me with a soft, almost eerie smile on his handsome face. His eyes were blank, and the light in his blue eyes had gone dim. While this image alone was horrific, it was his head, or rather his neck, that was the most frightening. His neck was clearly broken, because his head had twisted all the way around. I couldn't believe it. He was only 3. "No," I screamed. "Mom," I shouted. "Mom, help!" "What's going on?" Mom asked as she ran inside. My eyes wide with shock, tears welling up. I could barely speak. I was shaking so badly. "It's Zane!" I cried desperately. "Something is going to happen. You have to stop it." "No," she shouted at me angrily. "Not this again. You will stop this right now. I will not let you do this to your brother." "Do what?" I asked, stifling back tears. "I am not doing anything. Do you think I want this?" "Stop this now," she screamed. "I won't let you hurt him." She grabbed Zane and pushed him behind her as if to shield him from me. "Hurt him? I would never hurt—" My voice trailed off. "Is that what you think? You think I killed Dad?" I asked, dumbfounded. "How? Did I somehow invent something to make your heart explode?" "I won't let you destroy this family, Damien," she said, getting angrier. "You have to protect him," I begged. "Please, you know I am telling the truth." "That's it," Mom shouted. "You get out of here. You can go stay with your Aunt Jill. I can't do this anymore. I am not going to let you do this to me again." She was already grabbing my things. "Go to your room, honey," she told Zane. "I will be there soon." "Does Damien have to go?" Zane asked shyly, tears in his eyes. "Go to your room," Mom persisted. Zane turned and walked out. Mom packed my things, and though I begged and pleaded, she sent me on my way. Before she closed the door, I grabbed it and stopped her. "Protect him," I begged. "You have 5 days." I let the door go, and she slammed it behind me. Zane died exactly 5 days later. He fell off the jungle gym at daycare, his little head twisted completely around. "Why did you do it?" Mom shouted at me over the phone when I was told. My aunt swore to her that I had never left the house, but she persisted. It was my fault, she said. I never forgave her for those words. I adored Zane. I would truly miss him. But I guess she was right on some level. It was time to start owning who and what I am. I can see beyond the curtain, beyond the limits of life and death. Like Oppenheimer, I am literally the bringer of death, the destroyer of worlds. I stayed with my aunt for another 6 months after Zane passed away. Finally, my mother was ready to have me over for a weekend visit. She told me she didn't blame me for Dad, or Zane. The accountant had packed his bags shortly after Zane died. She told me she was tired of being all alone in the big house and was ready for company. So I agreed, and here I am, sitting in my old room, staring in the mirror. I can see my dimly lit brown eyes and my wavy brown hair. I can see my strong jaw and lean body. I can see my white V-neck t-shirt and blue jeans. I can also see the slice of open meat that used to be my neck, exposing my Adam's apple. I can see the bright red smile below my chin as the blood flows steadily from the open wound. I can see my eyes roll up in the back of my head, and I can see the red liquid staining my white t-shirt. I stare at the image with a huge sense of relief. I will no longer have to survive the pain of death. Soon it will be my turn. Don't blame my mother. We have both traveled beyond the veil. For me, it is a sea of torment where I scream in limbo. For her, she has gone beyond the veil of grief where insanity dwells beneath the surface. She knows not what she does. My pain will finally be at an end. All I need to do now is be patient. 5 more days, and I will be free.